And there you go.
Beautiful. So again, my name is Heather Russell from the U.S. Bank here on Vashon, and as well from the Board of Directors of the Chamber of Commerce. Today, I'm going to be giving some information about the second round of PPP. The parameters are a little bit different, hopefully extending more resources to small businesses as they need it. Let's look at the next slide. Some of the things that I'll be going over today is maybe in the first round of PPP, you weren't quite sure whether you wanted to borrow. So you can, for the first time, borrow in the second round. So I'll kind of talk about those criteria. I'll also talk about how you actually calculate the loan itself. There is an opportunity as well to increase existing PPP loans. So if you, I'll go over the details, but in certain circumstances, you may be able to apply for a bit more money for your first draw. I'll also talk about second draw PPP loans. So if you took it the first time and as well are looking to take it the second time, some of the forgiveness criteria, fraud prevention, and then just some resources at the end. So first time PPP borrowers, if you did not take advantage of it the first time, you may be eligible to apply up to 10 million under fairly similar criteria from the initial round. So what kind of businesses can borrow? So the basic thing that you need to think about is that you had to have been in business as of February 15th of 2020, so basically pre-pandemic, and have fewer than 500 employees, or otherwise meet the SBA size standard, and not have permanently closed your doors. So this applies to small businesses, whether that be a sole proprietorship, an LLC, or a corporation. It does apply to 501c3 nonprofits, to veterans organizations, tribal business concerns, and then in the accommodation and food service sector that employ 500 or fewer per physical location. So some also housing cooperatives, certain business league organizations, so like 501c6s, which I know the chamber falls under that, so that's lovely. News organizations and other destination marketing organizations are eligible, but there is certain kind of limitations to this. To calculate how much your loan request can be, you're going to take your average monthly payroll cost from 2019 and multiply that by 2.5. So it's basically 2.5 months worth of payroll. Or if you happen to be a business code of 72, it's a little bit more. It's 3.5 times your monthly payroll cost. So good news to some people who were maybe a little bit trepidatious the first time this came around. If you did not receive, existing PPP borrowers that did not receive loan forgiveness by December 27th of 2020 may, under certain circumstances, request an increase to their first loan. So essentially, this more recent bill was finally signed at the end of 2020, which kind of suspended all of the forgiveness process that was happening prior to that. So if you did not go through that whole process, you may be able to increase your first loan amount. Some of that, let's look at the next slide. So here are some of the circumstances that one might decide to increase your first PPP loan. So for example, if you had a partnership where you did not include some amount of one of the partners' compensation, so say distributions or something along those lines. Seasonal employers can also look at an alternative 12-week period from February 15th of 2019 through February 15th of 2020. So for example, if they maybe chose a slower time of year and then decided to take out the loan in a more conservative way for a little bit less, but they actually had a 12-week period where their payroll costs would have been more substantial, they can decide to change the 12-week period that they were using to calculate their loan. Similarly to like farmers and ranchers that also have sort of seasonal ways of calculating, they may be able to get more out of their loan. If a borrower did return part of their loan, then they can ask for an increase. But if you returned all of your loan, you have to actually go through a reapplication process. And then borrowers that did not accept the full amount of the loan for which they were approved. So they maybe were approved for $50,000, but decided I'm a little bit nervous about this, so I'm only going to take 25. They can get that additional 25,000. Okay, so second draw PPP loans. So great, you took advantage of that first PPP. It was super helpful, but now, we're 12 months now into the pandemic and you maybe need that second one. So you can apply for a second one up to $2 million, not the 10 million mark, but 2 million is going to be the max for this second round. The criteria to meet for a second loan was you have to have used the first PPP loan in its entirety. So if you also apply for any increased loan amount as part of this second round, you have to have used all of that as well. You had to have been in operation as of February 15th, 2020, and you may not have more than 300 employees. So remember, before it was 500, they've lowered that down to 300. So they're kind of focusing in on the smaller businesses here. And then the final criteria is kind of the big one that people are looking at in terms of their gross receipts. So you have to demonstrate that your gross receipts reduced by at least 25% from one quarter over quarter from 2019 to 2020. So meaning Q1 of 19 over Q1 of 2020. And if any of them, you could even have an increase in some of your quarters, but if any one quarter you lost revenue by more than 25%, then you are eligible for this loan. Okay, so coverable costs, or how you can use these funds and have them be fully forgiven. You can use the money for payroll costs is the big one, mortgage interest, rent, utilities, and there is a few things that it's expanded to. So covered property damage costs, if you happen to be, I'm not sure if there's really going to be anything applicable on Vashon, but if you happen to have property damaged during some of the Black Lives Matter or other kind of protests that happened over this past year, then you can get some of that property damage costs covered using the PPP. You can also use it if you had perishable goods, supplier, sorry, I'm trying to remember my own thing here. Okay, so expenditures to a supplier of goods pursuant to a contract, purchase order, or order for goods in effect prior to taking out the loan that are essential to the borrower's operations at the time which the expenditure was made. So essentially, if you needed to purchase goods and then were not able to use them.
So things that went bad.
Exactly. All right, some more forgivable uses of the funds. So covered worker protection expenditures between March 1st of 2020 and the end of the national emergency declaration. So whether that be PPE, so personal protective equipment, which was a big one, I think, for a lot of people, having to spend the money on all that hand sanitizer and masks and everything. And then adaptive investments to help a borrower comply with federal health and safety guidelines. Um, or anything that's equivalent to the state and local guidance related to the COVID-19.
Things like sneeze shields, things like floor stickers, sanitizers to clean pens. Do you think that they will allow for extra cleaning? Like if you have to have like deep cleans done for any
Yes,
specific reason, that would fall under here too?
absolutely.
Sorry, there's a lag in the slides.
No worries. So really great news that came out with this updated is more streamlined loan forgiveness. I think that's something that does bring people a lot of anxiety. Like, what if I don't get the whole thing forgiven? Am I doing this right to ensure that it does get forgiven? Any loans that are under 150,000, they really, really streamlined it so that they're not asking for a whole lot of documentation. So people can rest assured that it's a pretty simple process to get $150,000 or less to be forgiven. Do expect additional guidelines on this though. Right now, most institutions are not processing forgiveness right now because the SBA is working on kind of fine tuning some of the forgiveness processes. So keep on the lookout for that coming to you soon.
And so Heather, that's a question a lot of people have is, should I apply for forgiveness now before I apply for the second round of loan?
Yeah, and a lot of places are not accepting forgiveness applications right now because of the guidelines being kind of, out. The SBA is still working on that. So essentially, no, you cannot apply for forgiveness right now.
But you can apply for the second loan.
Correct.
So you just have to be comfortable that you've met that criteria that you talked about earlier, where you used all of the first loan. Mm-hmm. And meet the other criteria for size and for size of business. And then you can apply for your second one.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, I think that's just an important point. And there's people think they're kind of sequential, but they're not necessarily.
Yes, there is definitely some overlap and some leaps of faith that end up having to happen when you're in the situation where the guidelines are actually being lifetime changed in front of us. So yes. Protect your business against fraud. This was something that I just think is really important because whenever we have, money out there for the taking, there's always people out there who are going to try to use it to their advantage. And if it seems like, you're going to get your money in 24 hours or, 30 minutes even, if it's too good to be true, it's probably a scam. Just please, please, please do your due diligence. And the SBA, or there's no institution that I know of at all that's is requiring any fees on processing these loans. So if anybody says, if you pay this, then you'll get it faster, or you'll get more, or you'll get, whatever it is that they're trying to sell you, it is most likely a scam. So let's see, what did I say?
Well, I just want to add to this. I think that it's important that you check out, use a reputable bank, either regional or national. I also think it's really important to really look at the communications. They're getting very sophisticated. I just had a scam for my business that looked like actually my email to my accounting department. They literally copied it. They attached W-9 for somebody that was on LinkedIn. And the only reason I found out about the $70,000 invoice was because my COO said to me, well, why are you doing this and you didn't tell me? And I said, well, because I didn't do it. And so that's how we found out and didn't pay it, but they're getting very sophisticated, and you really have to look very carefully at everything that comes in. And if you're in doubt, call your bank.
Yeah, absolutely agree. One thing that I did want to kind of bring to everyone's attention is that the SBA is um, publishing this information publicly. Most financial institutions have very strict, privacy guidelines, and so they're not going to be sharing anybody's personal information. However, the SBA is a government, entity, and they did actually, as part of the law, say we're going to be transparent and say publicly that we have loaned XYZ money to all these different entities. I think that opens businesses up even further a little bit. So just be careful, protect your information, make sure it's from sources you trust. And again, remember what Cheryl said, that these fraudsters, the technology is very sophisticated. They can make emails look super professional. So yeah, just be careful.
Letters in the mail look super professional. And I will tell you, there have been businesses on the island. Don't think just because you're small that they won't target you, because actually I think just the opposite is true. Because they think if they're small, then maybe they're not as sort of in tune with sort of what to look for. And so just be really careful, because there have been some businesses on the island that have experienced fraud and to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just want to bring it up and reinforce how important it is to be careful, especially when they're publishing this data with your names out there.
Definitely. And then just my final slide here, a couple key resources is the treasury.gov as well as SBA.gov. They've got a lot of information on there about the PPP, and then as well other resources like the EIDL and so on and so forth.
And of course, like banks like yours, Heather, also offer lots of information and help make the process pretty smooth. It's kind of hard to believe that, at first it was hard to believe these loans were going to just show up in your bank account. And when they did, it was sort of amazing. So, it really has helped. I think a lot of people stay in business. So hopefully everybody can benefit from it. Does anybody have questions for Heather while we've got her, and any specific things we want to work through?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised if it's this easy. Like, it would surprise me. I was a little bit weary the first time around. I'm like, I'm doing okay. I can make it. So I don't want to get myself in a situation like this where I hate owing anybody money. So that is my biggest fear, is that, how this forgiveness thing works out. Will I be prepared to repay it? That's the hard part. Is I would like to speak to more people, I think, who have already gone through that forgiveness process of what that looks like exactly.
Heather,
Yeah,
do you know how many people have done that? Not many people have done that, right? The forgiveness at this juncture.
Gone through the forgiveness? Some people definitely have. I think a lot of, accountants and because you can push the forgiveness out until, I think it's almost like next fall. Because of how many changes there have been and different iterations of the parameters, it's kind of like, well, just hold tight, just wait and we'll see. Since you have the time, don't rush. Now, some people maybe only use the 8-week period, right? And so if they got their funds back in May, they used them by July, and they applied for forgiveness pretty promptly. So there are some people who certainly did that. And got it forgiven. But Krista, you are not alone. There is a lot of people who are kind of like, I'm not sure if I need this 100%. And if I don't need it, then maybe I'll just, don't want to take the risk.
Right.
Totally get that.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So from your knowledge, as far as this forgiveness program goes, do you just show, do you show all your accounting? Do you say, this is what I spent on payroll? This is, you break it down and kind of show your ledgers?
Yeah. So, in terms of payroll, that would be pretty simple. It's like your 940s and 941s that you can use to show. I don't know what sort of structure is your business? Are you like a sole
I'm
proprietor?
a sole proprietor at this time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes it really easy. Like literally it's like bank statements showing your paycheck going into your account, saying like, this is my payroll, me paying myself.
Okay.
It's literally that simple.
Okay.
And then in terms of like utilities, it's two pieces. It's the actual statement. So saying, you know, this is how much you owe to PSE, and then your check clearing saying this is how much I paid PSE. So it's kind of a two-parter there where it's like, this is what I owed and this is what I paid.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't, if there's a question in the chat about when will US Bank reopen forgiveness?
I'm not sure. They closed it after the 27th of December, and I'm not sure exactly when that will reopen.
And one of the things I just wanted to point out is the change in the criteria actually might make the difference on you being able to actually get to use the full amount of your loan. So it's important to look at that criteria, the new criteria, the additional criteria, because there were some things that were not originally included that now can be included. And so I know for the chamber, we're going back to look at sort of extra expenses that we would not have normally included in the first round, but we decided to hold on submitting for forgiveness at this juncture because we knew that there were more changes coming. And so we just held off. We didn't get a very big loan, but there's some things in there that it would definitely help with if we could include them.
Yeah. I think my sense is that they like the government really does want this money to get to people and want it to be forgiven. So I know that sometimes that's hard to believe, but it really is true. That's the intention of this.
Will interest be forgiven? Heather?
Interest in terms of what interest?
Jeff, do you want to ask your question fully?
Sure. So on the US Bank portal for our first round PPP loan, there's an amount that was loaned, and the balance is more than the amount owed. And it doesn't show interest being charged, but it shows that we owe more money than what we were lent already. So it seems like there's an accumulation of interest that's going on. And so because we're in the same situation as the chamber, we're still waiting for the application process for forgiveness to settle into something that we understand. and so we're just hoping to do that as soon as that all gets sorted out. But the balance is already increasing. And so we're just curious about if there's an interest charge that's accruing, and does that get reversed? I'm not sure what US Bank is doing with that.
That's a great question, Jeff. I honestly didn't think that they were charging interest until a certain time frame, and I'm trying to remember. Why don't I dig into that a little bit for you and look at your note, because in the contract itself, it will say how that's happening. But it was supposed to be 1% interest over 5 years, starting at a certain time period. And I'm just not remembering what that time period is, if it's a certain 6 months after disbursement or a year after disbursement. So let me look into that, and I'll be happy to circle back with you.
Yeah, I thought it was 10 months, Heather, but double check.
There you go. Yeah, I'm not remembering the time frame exactly.
Yeah, and one thing I know is we had a separate account for one of our loans for my business, and it was kind of a separate, in Chase, it was a separate account, but they didn't charge us any interest. So that's an interesting question, Jeff.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate everybody being on, and we will post the recording, and I hope everybody gets a chance to take advantage of the PPP to help out your organization or your business. And hopefully this answered some questions for you this morning.
Thank you all for making time. I really appreciate it. This is super helpful.
And
Thank
if
you.
you guys if there are any other webinars you're interested in, Deborah Diamond, who does all the unemployment stuff, is very interested. And I don't know if this really applies to you guys or not, but she is willing to do both unemployment as well as taxes, talk about tax submissions during this time. I don't know if anybody has any interest in those, but she has offered to do both of those talks. And then we're also going to be starting a whole new series around social media and really taking your business and organization to the next level. And one of the first ones going to be Lynn Ann Pillett from VCA talking about how to put your organization or business out there on Instagram. And what are the tips and tricks and how to do that. And Instagram is changing pretty rapidly. So it's actually something I think that's pretty useful if you want to get your business out there in front or your organization out there in front of people. So just wanted to mention that. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Chamber right now is also working on a directory of all members that's going to be mailed out to all Vashon households in May. And we're also doing a whole new digital online This is Vashon website with a digital magazine about the island. So hopefully you guys are members and can take advantage of being a part of that. So just wanted to, put in my little pitch. We're pretty excited about it. So that's what people are asking for. But anyway, with that, I want to say thank you for joining us. We'll post this. And if you have any questions, Heather's a fantastic resource.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Heather, as always. You're awesome.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye.